Action.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Lee Ball. I'm a liberal arts major here down at the Lower Campus, HCC. Today, I'm here to talk to you about an illness that affects not only many lives here in the U.S. but around the world. Um, it's not a transmittable disease, nor is it genetic. Actually, we're talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So, according to the Nebraska Department of Veteran Affairs, it's a psychiatric disorder that can occur following the experience or witnessing uh, life-threatening events such as military combat, natural disasters, that whole gist. But in actuality, it can be caused by a lot smaller things, things such as dog bites or bad breakups can cause certain types of PTSD. So, in studying this, I actually got a chance to interview someone, an expert in the field of PTSD, which is Rodney Powell. Here are some of his credentials. He got two master's degrees, one in social work and one in psychology. He's a licensed clinical social worker, and he's got experience counseling counseling PTSD victims. He specialized in rape and abuse in childhood and adulthood, actually. Yeah. So, as far as knee goes, his explanation for it was PTSD is when trauma happens and your brain can't deal with it rationally. So it creates reactive behaviors set off by triggers, either consciously or unconsciously. So, how many in here have heard of PTSD? Okay, that's good. Um, that's actually because it's really common here in the U.S. Um, this is a quick pie chart. 61% of males and 51% of females in the U.S. have all suffered some type of major trauma. Of the 61% of males, 8% develop PTSD, and of the 51% of females, 20% actually develop PTSD or some form of it, which is actually a lot. Considering there are 200 million people in the U.S. 20% of 50, what is that? 10% of females, meaning all suffering from PTSD. Okay. So, some signs and symptoms of PTSD. Like any other illness, it presents with certain symptoms. Okay? But like any other illness, these symptoms don't like specifically indicate one illness. It could be multiple. So differentiating between a bunch of other illnesses is actually the problem. Is what psychologists face. It's a problem they face in the field. Um, the main one they have to separate from is just common stress reactions to trauma. Anytime someone goes through trauma, there are going to be some type of reactions. There are five reactions actually. The first being fear and anxiety, fear of things reminding them of the trauma. You know, fear of the actual event reoccurring, any reoccurrences. Second, sadness and depression, withdrawing. Feeling empty, basic numbing to a certain extent. Guilt and shame, being feeling guilty for the event to have occurred, or possibly feeling guilty that maybe others suffered more than you did. Others died, you didn't. Things like that. Anger and irritability, lashing out, being irrational about small things. Just overreacting. And behavioral changes. Um, the main one I can think of, or that we see, is substance abuse. A lot of people after trauma, they don't know how to deal with it. They'll turn to start to try to alter their sobriety somehow, and drugs and alcohol. That's a major behavioral change that we see. Um, okay, but as far as PTSD, there are three major categories. 17 symptoms in all that psychologists use. They use a scale called the DSM-4 to measure whether or not someone does, and if they do, the severity of their PTSD. Okay? The first of the three are intrusions. These are intrusive thoughts. You know, it's like you can't turn it off. It's your brain playing reruns of the event. You know, creating emotional responses from you. Um, the second category, avoidance. Avoiding thoughts, you know, avoiding people, avoiding objects, and just basically like withdrawing. The third being hyperarousal. You can just tell by the word. You're hyper aroused. You know, you can't sleep, you can't focus, you can't concentrate on certain things. You're hyper vigilant, and you startle at the smallest things. Yeah. There are two major factors that separate these two, because a lot of the symptoms overlap. The two things you have to look at are time and severity. As far as time goes, common stress reactions, they should be going within, you know, they'll happen, but they'll subside eventually. You know, yeah, maybe a week, maybe a month, but eventually you get over them. PTSD being a serious disorder, is like any others. You can't get better without treatment. You know, it gets increasingly worse. And the second would be severity, which is, you know, you with common stress reactions, you can go through your day. You'll be fine. You know, you're uncomfortable, but you're not in distress. But PTSD victims, people who are suffering, they go through great distress. Their daily lives are extremely difficult. They have a hard time getting through the day without having some type of episode. One thing I just want to throw in, I don't have much to say about it, but is the way our cultures affect how we express ourselves, especially in the case of PTSD. Here in America, actually all Western cultures, basically industrialized cultures, we encourage people to get help. We encourage people to come on and say things like, "Hey, I'm not okay. I need help." You know. And then, you know, we're empathetic. We over sympathize with them sometimes. We tend to baby them in this culture, which can have some adverse effects. You know, people feel babied. They feel it creates pessimism. People think the world owes them something. Not all cases. Some cases in this culture, people are tough love. You know, oh, they should just get over it. But a lot of the time, we do indulge their self sympathy. That's not the case all over the world. In subsistence cultures, places where they rely on one another and the land to make a living, their economy, they can't afford to have irrational fear. So it's frowned upon. It's basically not allowed. You can't wake up one morning and say, "Hey, I got chased by a lion. You know, there's a near-death experience, so I can't go hunting today because it might still be out there." You know, it's geared towards the good of the community and the group, not one individual's feelings. You know, you just kind of have to suck it up, and that, of course, can be dangerous too. You know that it'll get increasingly worse, and eventually the individual will suffer even more. Okay. Treatments for PTSD. There are two major types of treatments: drugs and therapy. Drugs. Two major classes used to treat PTSD are antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds. Antidepressants, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. They you can read it up there, but basically it allows your body to keep more of the serotonin it's producing, and keep it at levels where there's more for your brain to use. You know, messages are going through past it. Eventually, it just boosts your mood. Anti-anxiety medications, Valium, lorazepam, diazepam. So, some of the same stuff they use for things like seizures, but for the most part, they adjust the chemicals in the brain, and they're used for like quick interventions. You know, if you're anxious and you need a quick response, they'll give it to you. It'll start to subside within half an hour. So it's more for like episodes. It's like having an asthma inhaler for an asthma attack. You know, it's not going to heal it, but it'll make the major symptoms go away quickly. The second one is therapy. There are the three different types of therapy used. and they all go hand in hand. Cognitive therapy, this type of therapy focuses on like it's a talk therapy. You talk to someone, they assess what you're saying. You guys work together to kind of process it. He makes suggestions. You take it in. You start to perceive it. He tries to alter the way you perceive daily, like react or how you react to things. Exposure therapy, it works hand in hand with cognitive therapy. Helps the person to safely address these issues. It takes steps. So Rodney would tell me, he told me, he used a great example about a dog bite. He had this patient who got bitten by a dog. It was a really bad bite, and he was unable to even look at a dog or see a dog or smell the smell of a dog without becoming anxious, sweating, um, becoming irrational about it. And so, in use of exposure therapy, he would slowly take steps to make that person, or suggest steps to try and help the person get over those fears. He'd start by showing him pictures of a dog. The next week, the next session they came in, the next goal would be maybe this time you walk past the dog. Within the next few weeks, I want you to come within 10 feet, 5 feet of a dog. Eventually, those fears start to kind of float away, and you're able to safely work on those fears. And eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So this is a real specific type of therapy. We use guided eye movements and talk therapy to try and bring out. It's basically like it's bringing out aspects that you may or may not remember from the trauma. So when you go home, say you go home and you throw all your stuff in a closet, close the closet. Everything's disorganized. Just like your thoughts. It happened. It's in there. It's disorganized. And every time you open that closet door, what happens? Things spill out. So that's basically what this is. They're opening the door and they're helping you to organize it. They don't want you to, every time you start to address it, you act irrationally. That would be everything falling out on you. They want you to kind of clean it up. But the danger in this, it works hand in hand with exposure therapy. The danger in this, in these last two types of therapy is not finishing. You can't address the problem. It can have adverse effects if you bring up things and feelings such about the trauma, memories they may not have remembered. You can't bring it up and then not work on it. So commitment to this type of therapy is actually vital. And that's the end of the treatments. That's basically the end of that's what I had to tell you about PTSD. I hope you guys learned a lot. PTSD is not a lot of people they try to downplay the effects, but you really don't know it until you've lived it. Personally, I've lived with someone with PTSD and it's rough. I hate to say it, but full disclosure, my dad served in combat in Iraq, and coming back, just from the very beginning, you could tell he wasn't the same. He was real agitated all the time. He would become completely irrational with the smallest things. His irritability factor was through the roof. So, it was different, and forget trying to talk to him about it. So after maybe a year, he decided to try and go and get help, and man, within the first couple sessions of therapy, it started to show like a completely different person. But again, trying to live with someone with PTSD, even being around them, and I haven't suffered from it, so I wouldn't know, but I can only imagine it's a lot harder for the victim than it is for the people living, but it affects everyone regardless, So that's my little tale. I hope you guys learned a lot about PTSD, and I hope you guys take away that a lot of people are suffering, and we should even though I spoke about it, we should sympathize and empathize for these people. Okay, so do you guys have any questions? No? Okay. Thank you for coming. Hope to see you all later.